The ocean moon of 4 was a quiet place. It floated in the darkness of space like a blue pearl, covered almost entirely by water. Beneath those waters lived a peaceful species who had never known war. They built their cities from coral and glowing stones. They sang songs that echoed through the deep currents. They watched the stars from their observation spires but never wished to conquer them. They had no enemies because they wanted nothing from the galaxy. And for thousands of years, the galaxy wanted nothing from them. Elder had led his people for 60 cycles. His skin was pale blue, like the shallow waters of the northern reefs. His eyes were large and kind, the eyes of someone who had seen much and judged little. He spent his mornings in the great observation spire, watching the surface of the ocean shimmer far above and the stars beyond that. It was on such a morning that everything changed. A young messenger came swimming up the spire in a panic. His gills fluttered with fear. "Elder, something has fallen from the sky, a vessel of metal and fire. It crashed into the northern sea." Rose slowly from his seat. "Show me." They swam together through the crystal tunnels until they reached the northern boundary of the city. There, gathered at the edge of the reef, dozens of stared upward. Above them, sinking slowly through the water, was a broken ship. It was small, barely larger than a dwelling. Smoke and bubbles poured from its wounds. Strange symbols were painted on its side. "What is it?" asked his young daughter. She had pushed her way to the front of the crowd, her eyes wide with curiosity. "A ship from beyond our world," said, "from the stars." "Is it dangerous?" Did not answer. He was watching the ship settle onto the sandy bottom. Through a cracked window he could see movement. Something was alive inside. The council gathered within the hour. 12 elders sat in a circle, their voices overlapping as they debated. "We should leave it alone," said Counselor Myra, the oldest among them. "We know nothing of these star travelers. The galaxy is full of dangerous species. Why invite trouble into our home?" "But there is someone inside," another counselor argued. "Someone who may be dying. Can we simply watch and do nothing?" "We have no weapons," Myra replied. "No defenses. If this is a trick, if this is the beginning of an invasion, we will have no way to protect ourselves." The argument continued for a long time. Listened to every voice, his expression calm and thoughtful. Finally, when the others had grown tired, he raised his hand for silence. "I have heard your concerns," he said. "They are wise concerns, but I am reminded of an old saying passed down from our ancestors: the tide that carries one away may one day carry another home." He paused, letting the words settle. "We do not know who is inside that vessel. We do not know if they are friend or enemy, but we know one thing for certain. They are alone, they are hurt, and they need help." He looked around the circle. "I will not force any of you to agree with me, but I believe we must try to save them, because that is who we are. That is who we have always been." The vote was close, but it passed. Himself led the rescue team. They cut through the hull of the crashed ship with tools meant for harvesting coral. Inside, they found a small chamber filled with strange machines and blinking lights. And in the center, strapped to a chair, was a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. She had 2 arms, 2 legs, and pale skin covered in burns and cuts. Her hair was dark and matted with blood. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was shallow. Around her neck hung a small device that made sounds none of them understood. "Careful," whispered, "she is fragile." They carried her back to the city with great care. The healers worked through the night, using medicines drawn from the deep-sea plants. They did not know this creature's body, but they learned quickly. They closed her wounds. They eased her fever. They gave her water and warmth. 3 days later, she opened her eyes. Her name was. She was 26 years old, a pilot from a world called Earth. She had been part of an exploration team, mapping the far edges of the galaxy when her ship was caught in a gravitational storm. The damage had been severe. She had drifted for days, running out of air, before crashing into the ocean of 4. She should have died. She knew that. Every calculation, every odd said she should be floating dead in space. Instead, she woke up in a city of coral and light, surrounded by gentle creatures who spoke in musical tones and watched her with curious, caring eyes. At first, communication was difficult. The device around her neck was a translator, but it needed time to learn the language. So and the spoke with gestures, with drawings, with patience. Slowly, understanding grew. Learned that they had no word for war. They had no concept of armies or conquest. When she tried to explain the conflicts of her own galaxy, they listened with sad confusion. "Why would anyone want to hurt others?" asked one day, sitting beside in the healing chamber. "What could be worth such pain?" Had no good answer. As the weeks passed, grew stronger. She began to repair her ship, using parts that helped her gather from the wreckage. She taught and the other young to fold paper into shapes, birds, stars, flowers. They laughed with delight at these simple creations, and soon paper folding became a popular game throughout the city. 3 months after her crash, ship was ready to fly again. It would not be comfortable, and it would not be fast, but it would carry her home. She stood before the council one last time. Elder sat at the center, his kind eyes watching her. "I do not have words to thank you," said, her voice thick with emotion. "I have nothing to give you, no treasure, no technology you would want. My people are far away, and I am only one small person." Smiled gently. "We did not help you for reward, young one. We helped you because you needed help. That is reason enough." Nodded, tears ran down her face. "I will remember this," she said. "I will remember all of you. Humans have long memories, Elder. We do not forget kindness. We do not forget our debts." "There is no debt," said. "Only friendship. Go in peace of Earth. May the tides carry you home." Climbed into her ship. She looked down at the one last time, these strange and beautiful people who had saved her life for no reason at all. Then she fired her engines and rose through the water, through the atmosphere, and into the stars. They watched until her ship was nothing but a distant light. Then they returned to their quiet lives, their songs, their coral cities. They did not speak of often. Years passed. Elder grew old, his daughter grew wise, the galaxy continued to turn. None of them knew that somewhere among the stars, a young woman was rising through the ranks of her people's military. She carried a paper bird in her pocket wherever she went, and every night before she slept, she whispered a promise to the darkness. "I will not forget, I will never forget." Humans always remember. 12 years passed on the ocean moon of 4. The seasons changed. The tides rose and fell. Children were born and elders passed into the great silence. Life continued as it always had, quiet and peaceful and unchanged. Elder still lived, though he was very old now. His movements were slow, and he spent most of his days resting in the warm currents near the city center. His daughter had taken over most of the council duties. She was 30 cycles old, still young by standards but wise beyond her years. The other elders respected her. The people loved her. Often thought about the human who had crashed into their sea all those years ago. She still kept one of the paper birds had taught her to fold. It sat on a shelf in her dwelling, slightly worn from the water but still holding its shape. Sometimes, late at night, would look at it and wonder where was now. Was she alive? Had she found her way home? Did she ever think about These questions had no answers, so pushed them aside and focused on her duties. The galaxy, meanwhile, was changing. Travelers came to force sometimes, traders looking for rare minerals, scientists studying the unique life forms of the ocean moon, wanderers with no particular destination. From these visitors, the heard stories of the wider universe. Most of these stories meant nothing to them. Wars between distant empires, political alliances forming and breaking, new technologies being discovered. But one name began to appear more and more often in these stories: the Dominion. They were a powerful species from the far side of the galaxy. They were tall, reptilian creatures with hard scales and cold eyes. For generations, they had ruled a small cluster of systems, but something had changed. Their new leader, a warlord named Grand Marshal, had begun to expand. System after system fell under Dominion control. Some surrendered peacefully and were absorbed as servant worlds. Others resisted and were destroyed. They listened to these stories with growing unease. But 4 was far from Dominion space. Surely they were safe. Surely no one would bother with a small ocean moon that had nothing of value. They were wrong. The Dominion Herald arrived on a morning like any other. His ship descended through the atmosphere and hovered above the water, casting a dark shadow over the reef below. They gathered to watch, their hearts filled with fear. A smaller craft detached from the main ship and dove into the water. Minutes later, it surfaced inside the great council chamber, its hatch hissing open. The creature that emerged was unlike anything they had seen. He was massive, nearly twice the height of the tallest. His scales were dark green, and his eyes burned with cold intelligence. He wore armor decorated with symbols of conquest. His name was, and he was the voice of the Dominion. Stood to meet him. Her hearts pounded in her chest, but she kept her face calm. Behind her, the other council members watched in silence. "I am Counselor," she said. "Welcome to 4, how may we help you?" Did not return the greeting. He looked around the chamber with obvious contempt. "The Dominion claims this system," he announced. His voice was deep and harsh, like stones grinding together. "Your world now belongs to the Grand Marshal. You will provide tribute, workers for our mines, resources from your oceans, complete obedience to Dominion law." Felt the blood drain from her face. "We are a peaceful people," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "We have no armies, no weapons. We cannot serve in your wars." Stepped closer, towering over her. "That is not your decision to make. The Dominion does not ask. The Dominion takes." "But we have nothing you want," protested. "We are simple people. We live beneath the water. We sing songs and grow gardens. What use could we possibly be to an empire?" For a moment something flickered in his eyes. It might have been amusement, or pity, or simply boredom. "Every world has use," he said. "If not for resources, then for labor. If not for labor, then as an example." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Other species are watching. They need to see what happens to those who do not submit. Your world will serve that purpose nicely." His hands trembled at her sides. "And if we refuse?" Smiled, it was not a kind smile. "Then in 30 cycles our fleet will arrive. We will burn your cities. We will boil your oceans. We will erase your species from existence. Every man, woman, and child. Gone, as if you never existed." The chamber was silent. Some of the council members wept quietly. Others stared in shock. Turned and walked back toward his craft. At the entrance, he paused and looked over his shoulder. 30 cycles, he repeated. "Use them wisely." Then he was gone. His ship rose through the water and vanished into the sky. That night sat alone in the observation spire. It was the same place where her father had spent so many hours, watching the stars and thinking deep thoughts. Now those stars seemed different, cold, threatening, full of enemies she had never known existed. Her father found her there, moving slowly through the water on weak fins. "I heard what happened," said softly, settling beside her. "The whole city is talking about it." "What do we do, father?" asked. Her voice broke. "How do we fight an empire? We have no ships, no weapons, no allies. We are nothing to them, less than nothing." Was quiet for a long time. Finally he spoke. "Do you remember the human, the one who crashed here when you were young?" Nodded. "I think about her sometimes." She said something before she left. She said humans have long memories, that they do not forget kindness or debts. "That was 12 years ago, father. She was one person. She probably died in space or forgot about us the moment she left." Smiled faintly. "Perhaps, or perhaps not. Humans are strange creatures. I have thought about them often since that day. A species that travels across the stars not to conquer but to explore. A young woman who wept when she said goodbye to strangers who had helped her. He paused. There is something different about them, something I do not fully understand. Even if she remembered us, what could one human do against the Dominion? I do not know, admitted, but I believe in the power of small things. A single drop of water seems powerless, but enough drops become a tide, and tides can move mountains. Wanted to believe him. She wanted to have hope, but as she looked up at the cold stars, all she felt was despair. Far away, beyond the reach of sensors, beyond the knowledge of the Dominion, a message was traveling. It had been sent from a small trading post near 4, where a merchant had witnessed the Dominion herald's visit. The message passed from ship to ship, station to station, traveling across the vast distances of space at the speed of light. Eventually, it reached a military outpost on the edge of human territory. An intelligence officer read it, noted its contents, and forwarded it up the chain of command. 3 days later, the message arrived on the desk of a woman who sat in a large office overlooking the blue oceans of Earth. Her hair was streaked with now. Lines marked her face, but her eyes were the same, dark and determined. Admiral Park read the report twice. 4. Under threat of extinction by the Dominion. She closed her eyes and remembered, warm hands pulling her from the cold water, gentle voices singing her to sleep, a wise old elder who told her to go in peace. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn paper bird, its edges soft from years of handling. I promised, she whispered, I promised I would not forget. She opened a secure channel to Terran High Command. This is Admiral Park. I need an emergency meeting with the full Admiralty. Tonight, this is not a request. The message went out, and across the galaxy, wheels began to turn. The Terran Admiralty met in a chamber deep beneath the surface of Earth. The room was circular, with 7 chairs arranged in a half-moon pattern facing a large holographic display. These 7 admirals controlled the most powerful military force humanity had ever built. Their decisions shaped the fate of billions. Admiral Park stood before them, her uniform crisp and her back straight. She had requested this meeting, and she knew it would not be easy. The admirals were practical people. They dealt in numbers, in strategy, in cold calculations of risk and reward. What she was about to ask them would not fit neatly into any equation. Thank you for meeting with me, began. I know this is unusual, but I believe the situation requires immediate action. Admiral, the eldest of the 7, leaned forward. He was 80 years old, his hair white as snow, but his mind was still sharp as a blade. We have read the intelligence reports, he said. The Dominion is threatening a small species on an ocean moon. This is tragic, but I fail to see why it requires the attention of the full Admiralty. Because I intend to stop them, said simply. A murmur ran through the chamber. The admirals exchanged glances. Stop the Dominion, asked Admiral, a woman with short hair and skeptical eyes. The control over 200 systems. They have a fleet larger than anything we have ever faced, and you want to start a war with them over a species most humans have never heard of. I am not asking to start a war, replied. I am asking to prevent a genocide. By risking Terran lives, Admiral said. By spending Terran resources. For what? A moon that has no strategic value, a species that cannot help us in return. Took a deep breath. She had known this moment would come. She had prepared for it. But standing here now, facing these powerful men and women, she felt the weight of what she was asking. 12 years ago, she said, my exploration vessel was caught in a gravitational anomaly. My ship was destroyed. I was dying, alone in the void with no hope of rescue. No one knew where I was. No one was coming to save me. She paused, letting the silence stretch. My ship crashed on 4, the found me. They did not know what I was. They had never seen a human before. Some of them wanted to leave me to die. It would have been safer. It would have been smarter. but their leader, an old man named, made a different choice. He saved my life. Admiral, the youngest member of the Admiralty, leaned forward with interest. Why? What did he hope to gain? Nothing, said. That is the point. He saved me because I needed saving, because it was the right thing to do. He expected nothing in return. A noble story, Admiral said, but stories do not win wars. No, agreed, but they define who we are. They show the galaxy what humans stand for. She stepped closer to the display and activated a holographic map. Stars and systems filled the air around her. Look at this map, she said. Look at how far we have come. A few centuries ago, we were trapped on one small planet fighting over scraps of land. Now we span 1,000 worlds. We have built wonders that our ancestors could not have imagined. And we did it not through conquest, but through curiosity, through cooperation, through the belief that the universe is better when we help each other. She pointed to a small blue dot on the edge of the map. This is 4. It is small. It is weak. It has nothing we need. But 12 years ago, the people of that moon showed me what kindness looks like. They showed me that there is good in the universe, even in the darkest places. Her voice grew stronger. The Dominion rules through fear. They expand because no one stands against them. Every world they threaten asks the same question, who will help us? And every time the answer is no one, so they surrender or they die. She looked at each admiral in turn. I am asking you to give a different answer. I am asking you to show the galaxy that humans do not abandon those who helped us, that we stand by our friends no matter how small or weak they are, that kindness is not weakness, that mercy is not foolishness. The chamber was silent. Finally, Admiral spoke. I have studied the Dominion extensively. They are powerful, yes, but they are also overextended. They have conquered too many worlds too quickly. Their supply lines are stretched thin. Their soldiers are tired. She pulled up data on the display. If we strike fast and hard, we can hurt them, badly. And what happens after? Admiral demanded. Even if we win this battle, we will have made an enemy of the Dominion. They will not forget. Neither will we, said, and neither will anyone else. Every species in this sector will see what we did. They will see that humans protect their friends. Some will fear us, but others will want to be our friends too. That is how empires fall, Admiral, not through conquest but through isolation. The Dominion rules because everyone is afraid to stand alone. What happens when they are no longer alone? Admiral studied her for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. You are asking us to risk everything, he said slowly, on the hope that kindness will be repaid with kindness. Yes, said I am. And if you are wrong, if the galaxy watches us sacrifice our ships and our people, and then simply goes back to being afraid, smiled sadly, then at least we will know that we tried, that we were the kind of people who did not look away when others suffered. That is worth something, Admiral. Even if no one else remembers, we will remember. The vote took place an hour later. It was not unanimous. Admiral voted against. Admiral abstained, but the rest voted yes. The first Terran expeditionary Armada began to assemble. Over the next 2 weeks, ships gathered from across human space. Battle cruisers with hulls of dark steel, carriers filled with hundreds of fighters, support vessels loaded with supplies and ammunition. Engineers worked around the clock, preparing weapons and checking systems. Admiral Park took command of the flagship, a massive vessel called the Remembrance. It was one of the largest ships humanity had ever built, bristling with weapons and protected by layers of advanced shielding. Her second-in-command was Captain Shin, a veteran officer with a calm demeanor and sharp instincts. He had served under for 5 years and trusted her completely. 47 warships, said, reviewing the fleet roster on his tablet. 12 carrier groups, over 3,000 fighters. This is the largest force we have ever deployed outside human space. Nodded, watching the ships fall into formation through the viewport. It has to be enough. The Dominion will not expect this, continued. They think humans are soft, explorers and traders. They have never seen what we can do when we are angry. Then it is time to educate them, said. The fleet made its final preparations. Pilots ran through simulation after simulation. Gunners calibrated their weapons. Commanders reviewed battle plans and contingencies. On the bridge of the Remembrance stood alone, looking out at the stars. In her hand she held the worn paper bird, its edges soft from years of touch. "I am coming," she whispered to the darkness. "Hold on just a little longer, help is coming." The order went out across the fleet. All ships prepare for hyperspace jump. Destination 4. We leave in 1 hour. Engines hummed. Reality bent. And 47 ships vanished into the void, racing toward a small ocean moon where an entire species waited to die. They would not wait alone. 28 days had passed since the Dominion Herald delivered his ultimatum. They had spent those days in quiet despair. Some prayed to the old gods of the deep. Others held their families close and tried not to think about what was coming. A few brave souls attempted to build weapons, but they had no knowledge of such things. Their efforts produced nothing useful. Counselor did what she could to keep her people calm. She visited the schools and assured the children that everything would be fine. She met with the elders and discussed plans for evacuation, though they all knew there was nowhere to run. She sat with her father and listened to his old stories, treasuring each moment they had left. On the morning of the 29th day, the Dominion fleet arrived. 60 warships dropped out of hyperspace above 4. They were massive vessels built for destruction. Their hulls were covered with weapons. Their engines glowed with menacing red light. At their center flew the command ship of Fleet Commander, a veteran of 100 conquests. Looked down at the blue ocean moon with cold satisfaction. This would be easy. They had no defenses, no allies. In a few hours this world would be burning and the rest of the sector would learn once again the price of defiance. "Prepare landing forces," he ordered, "and charge the orbital bombardment cannons. If they do not surrender within the hour, begin the cleansing." His officers moved to obey. Below on 4, they watched the sky fill with enemy ships. Panic spread through the cities. Mothers grabbed their children and fled toward the deep trenches. Elders gathered in the temples to sing their final songs. Stood in the observation spire, her hearts breaking. This was the end. Everything her people had built, everything they had dreamed would be destroyed, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Her father appeared beside her, moving slowly on his weak fins. "You should be in the shelters," said. "No," replied gently. "If this is to be our last day, I will spend it with my daughter watching the sky." Took his hand. Together they waited for death. And then the sky changed. New lights appeared among the stars. Not the red glow of Dominion engines, but something different. Bright blue, steady and strong. More and more of them, emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. "What is that?" whispered. His eyes widened. On his ancient face something impossible appeared. Hope. "Humans," he breathed. "The humans have come." The Terran Expeditionary Armada arrived like a thunderclap. 47 warships dropped out of hyperspace directly between the Dominion fleet and 4. They moved with precise coordination, spreading into attack formation with practiced efficiency. On the bridge of the Remembrance, Admiral Park surveyed the enemy fleet. 60 ships, larger than expected, but she had not come this far to turn back. "Open a channel," she ordered. "All frequencies. I want everyone to hear this." The communication officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Stood straight, her voice calm and clear. "This is Admiral Park of the Terran Expeditionary Force. The people of 4 are under our protection. Any attack on this world will be considered an act of war against the Terran Republic. You have one chance to withdraw. Take it." On the Dominion command ship, Fleet Commander listened to the transmission with disbelief. "Humans?" Here, he had heard of them, of course, a young species on the far side of the galaxy, explorers and scientists mostly, not warriors, certainly not a threat to the mighty Dominion. He laughed out loud. "The humans think they can challenge us," he said to his officers. "With what, 40 ships against our 60, this is not a battle, this is a joke." He opened a return channel. "Terran vessel, I do not know why you are here or what you hope to accomplish, but you are outnumbered and outmatched. Withdraw now, and I will allow you to leave with your lives. Stay, and you will share the fate of this pathetic moon." Smiled thinly. "We are not going anywhere, and I think you will find that we are full of surprises." "Then you have chosen death," replied. "All ships attack formation, destroy the humans, then continue with the cleansing." The Dominion fleet surged forward. For a moment the void was still. Two fleets faced each other across the darkness, separated by thousands of kilometers of empty space. Then the battle began. Terran fighters launched from the carriers in great swarms. They were smaller than Dominion craft but faster and more agile. They darted through enemy formations, drawing fire and creating chaos. Behind them, the larger warships opened fire with weapons the Dominion had never seen. Accelerated metal projectiles to incredible speeds, punching through Dominion shields like paper. Energy beams carved burning lines across enemy hulls. Electronic warfare systems scrambled Dominion communications, turning their coordinated fleet into a confused mass. Watched in shock as 3 of his ships exploded in the first minute of combat. "What is this?" he demanded. "How are they doing this?" His tactical officer had no answer. The Terran weapons were more powerful than anything in their database. The Terran tactics were unpredictable and aggressive, and the Terran pilots fought with a fury that bordered on madness. Captain led a strike group directly into the heart of the Dominion formation. His voice was calm over the communication channel, even as explosions filled the space around him. "Alpha Wing, target the command ship's sensors. Blind them before they can coordinate. Beta Wing, protect the carriers. Do not let anything through." The pilots obeyed without hesitation. They had trained for this, they had prepared for this, and they believed in their mission. On the Remembrance directed the battle with cool precision. She had studied Dominion tactics for weeks during the journey. She knew their weaknesses, their patterns, their blind spots. "Cruiser Group 3 flank left. Draw their attention. Group 4 punch through the gap and hit their supply ships. Cut off their support." The orders went out and the fleet responded. The Terrans fought as one organism, each ship knowing its role, each pilot trusting their commanders. The battle raged for hours. Ships died on both sides. Terran and Dominion vessels burned together in the void, but slowly, inevitably, the tide turned. The Dominion fleet was not prepared for this kind of fight. They were used to overwhelming weaker opponents with superior numbers. They did not know how to handle an enemy that matched them in firepower and exceeded them in coordination. One by one their ships fell, 20 destroyed, 30, 40. The survivors began to retreat, engines straining as they fled toward the edge of the system. Stood alone on his damaged bridge, staring at the tactical display in disbelief. His fleet was broken. His mission had failed. And the humans, these soft explorers he had dismissed as a joke, had done the impossible. His final transmission was filled with rage and confusion. "This is not possible," he snarled. "You are only humans. How did you do this?" His response was broadcast across all channels, reaching every ship in both fleets, every sensor on 4, every listening post in the sector. "Yes," she said simply. "We are only humans, remember that." The Dominion fleet fled. The battle was over. Below on 4, they emerged from their shelters and looked up at the sky. The terrible red lights were gone, replaced by steady blue glows. The enemy ships were burning ruins or distant specks running for their lives. Stood in the observation spire, tears streaming down her face. "They came," she whispered. "They actually came." Held her hand tightly. His old eyes were filled with wonder. "I told you," he said softly. "The tide that carries one away may one day carry another home." The humans remembered. They kept their promise. Above them, the Terran fleet began to settle into protective orbit around the little ocean moon, standing guard over friends they had traveled across the galaxy to save. The news of the Battle of Four spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species with access to long-range communications heard the story. A small ocean moon, home to a peaceful people with no weapons and no allies, had been threatened with extinction by the mighty Dominion. And humans, a young species from the far side of the galaxy, had crossed vast distances to defend them. Not for resources, not for territory, not for any strategic advantage, but because 12 years earlier they had saved a single human life. The story changed things. For years, the Dominion had expanded without meaningful opposition. Smaller species surrendered because they believed resistance was pointless. Who would help them? Who would risk their own safety for strangers? Now they had an answer. The Dominion was forced to reconsider its strategy. Grand Marshal, the supreme ruler of the, gathered his advisors in the great war chamber of his throne world. They had lost half a fleet to the humans. More importantly, they had lost something far more valuable, the belief that they were unstoppable. "We cannot ignore this insult," growled General, one of the Marshal's oldest commanders. "The humans have embarrassed us before the entire galaxy. We must respond with overwhelming force, crush their worlds, show everyone what happens to those who challenge the Dominion." But other voices urged caution. "The humans are more dangerous than we realized," said Admiral, who had studied the battle reports carefully. "Their technology is advanced. Their tactics are unpredictable, and they fought with a ferocity we have never seen. A full war with them could last years, decades. We would weaken ourselves while our other enemies watch and wait." The debate continued for days. In the end, the Grand Marshal made a decision that surprised everyone. He sent diplomats instead of soldiers. The negotiations took place on a neutral station far from both human and Dominion space. Admiral Park represented the Terran Republic. Across the table sat Ambassador, a high-ranking Dominion official with the authority to make binding agreements. The talks were tense. Neither side trusted the other, but both sides understood the cost of continued war. After 3 weeks of careful discussion, a treaty was signed. The Four system was declared neutral territory, protected under Terran guarantee. The Dominion agreed to halt expansion into 12 neighboring systems, creating a buffer zone of safety. In exchange, the Terrans agreed to refrain from interfering in Dominion internal affairs. It was not a perfect peace. Both sides knew that tensions would continue, but it was a beginning. When the treaty was announced, celebrations erupted across the protected systems. Species that had lived in fear for generations dared to hope for the first time. Some sent messages of thanks to the Terran Republic. Others began to whisper about the possibility of alliance, of standing together against threats they could not face alone. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was at the center of that change. Admiral Park returned to 4 one final time. Her shuttle descended through the atmosphere and dove into the crystal waters. They had built a special landing platform for her visit, decorated with flowers from the deep gardens and lights that glowed in 1,000 colors. Counselor waited at the platform's edge, surrounded by hundreds of her people. They had come from every city on the moon to see the human who had saved them. Children pressed forward, their eyes wide with curiosity. Elders bowed their heads in respect. Stepped out of her shuttle and walked slowly toward. The years showed on her face now, streaked her hair. Lines marked the corners of her eyes. She had fought a battle that would be remembered for generations. But in this moment she did not look like a conquering hero. She looked tired. She looked human. swam forward to meet her. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Two women from different worlds, connected by a thread of kindness that had stretched across 12 years and 1,000 light years. "Thank you," said finally. Her voice trembled with emotion. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for saving us." Shook her head slowly. "You saved me first. I am just returning the favor. We gave you shelter for 3 months. You brought an armada to fight an empire. That is not an equal exchange." Smiled softly. "It is not about equal exchange. It never was." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the worn paper bird. It was faded now, its edges soft and rounded from years of touch. "Your father gave me a gift that day, not just my life. He gave me faith. Faith that there is goodness in the universe. That kindness exists even among strangers. That small acts can matter." She pressed the paper bird into his hands. "I have carried this with me for 12 years. Every time I doubted myself, every time I wondered if anything I did mattered, I looked at this and remembered. A wise old man saved a dying stranger because it was the right thing to do. That is the kind of universe I want to live in. That is the kind of person I want to be." Clutched the paper bird to her chest, tears flowing freely down her face. Behind her, Elder was being helped through the crowd by 2 young attendants. He was so frail now that he could barely swim, but his eyes were bright and his smile was warm. Saw him and immediately moved forward, kneeling before him in the water. "Elder," she said softly, "I kept my promise." Reached out and placed a gentle hand on her head. His touch was light as a feather. "I knew you would," he said. "From the moment I saw you climb out of that broken ship, I knew. There was something in your eyes, a fire that would not die. I did not save you because I expected anything in return, but I am glad of Earth. I am glad to see what my small act of kindness became." Looked up at him, tears in her own eyes now. "You taught me something important. You taught me that the universe is not empty, that even in the darkest places there are lights. Small lights, maybe, but enough small lights can push back any darkness." Smiled his gentle smile. "And you taught my people something too. You taught us that we are not alone, that there are friends among the stars who will come when we call. That is a precious gift, more precious than you know." The celebration that night was unlike anything had ever seen, and humans mingled together, sharing food and stories. Children taught human sailors to fold paper into birds and stars and flowers. Soldiers who had fought a desperate battle sat with peaceful elders and listened to songs that had been sung for thousands of years. Sat with and in a quiet corner, away from the crowds. "What happens now?" asked. "Will you stay?" Shook her head. "I cannot. My people need me. There is still much work to do. The Dominion has agreed to peace for now, but peace is fragile. It must be protected." "Will we ever see you again?" Looked up at the stars visible through the water above. "I do not know," she said honestly. "The universe is large and life is uncertain, but I will tell you what I told your father 12 years ago. Humans have long memories. We do not forget our friends. No matter how far apart we are, no matter how much time passes, you will always be in our hearts." She turned to look at directly. "And if you ever need us again, you only have to call. We will come, I promise." The Terran fleet departed the next morning. They gathered at the surface of their ocean to watch the ships rise into the sky, their engines painting trails of light across the dawn. Elder stood beside his daughter, watching until the last ship vanished among the stars. "Do you understand now," he asked softly, "why we saved her all those years ago?" Nodded slowly. In her hands she held the paper bird had given her. "Because it was right," she said. "Yes," agreed. "And because you never know what a single act of kindness might become. A young woman crashes on our world, alone and dying. We help her. We expect nothing. And 12 years later she returns with an armada to save us from extinction." He paused, looking up at the empty sky. "The universe is vast, my daughter, cold and dark and full of dangers, but it is also full of possibilities, full of connections we cannot see. A kindness given is never wasted. It ripples outward, touching lives we will never know, changing futures we cannot imagine. Held the paper bird close to her heart. "I will remember," she whispered. "I will teach my children and they will teach theirs. We will tell the story of and the humans who came from the stars. We will remember what they did for us, and we will pass that kindness forward to every stranger who needs our help." Smiled and closed his eyes at peace. Far above, among the stars, a haired woman stood on the bridge of a great warship, looking back at a small blue moon growing distant behind her. In her pocket was a new paper bird given to her before she left, held it gently, feeling its delicate weight. She thought about all the people who had doubted her, the admirals who called her foolish, the strategists who said the mission was a waste of resources. They had been wrong, all of them. Because kindness was never a weakness, mercy was never foolishness, and protecting the innocent, standing up for those who could not stand for themselves, was the most human thing of all. She looked at the stars stretching out before her, endless and full of mystery. Somewhere out there, other small worlds waited in fear. Other peaceful people prayed for help that might never come. But now they knew, now everyone knew. Humans remember, humans protect their friends, and when kindness calls, humans answer. Always.